Good morning, everyone. Um, welcome everyone to this virtual dialogue on mentorship in community engaged arts. We're gonna have a bit of a slow start here as folks trickle in, but wherever you're reaching us from in Canada, I know some of you might be midday already. For us here on the West Coast, it's still early morning or early for my for my brain. But I am thrilled to see some familiar faces here joining us, as well as people who are new to me. Um, my name is Nicole Armos. I work at the Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogues in the Knowledge and Practice team, where we work to build capacity for facilitation of dialogue and public engagement. And I have a particular interest within this in arts-based facilitation, having worked for many years with Judith Marquis, who's joining us as well today, in the International Center for Art for Social Change, in a research project that was there, through which that's how I know a lot of the names that I'm seeing here on the screen. And that was kind of the foundation. I'm going to be explaining a little more of that story, the foundation for a current research project that I'm involved in called Performing Mentorship, with my lovely colleagues who I will be introducing in a minute as well. But before I go on, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from my home, my nursery / office in Surrey, BC, which is within the traditional territories of the Semiahmoo, the Katzie, the Coquitlam, the Kwantlen, the Kikite, and the Tsawwassen First Nations. As a daughter of immigrants and my dad was a refugee, I'm always so grateful to call this place my home. And also so grateful to have had opportunities through my work to travel across Canada, to be on different lands, to get to know different Indigenous communities, cultures, as well as Indigenous artists and leaders in these communities. And so just to kind of start us off, if we can go to the next slide, Melvin. When I'm thinking about art, I often remember this wonderful interview with artist Patty Fraser and the Squamish carver Aaron Nelson Moody, where he was explaining that in Squamish culture, art is not a separate thing you do, but is rather integral to life through their music, clothing, food, song, dance, and so many other creative mediums. And he said, each time we engage in an activity, we learn the lesson from those materials, from the connection with that part of nature, connection with that community. And he spoke about how art is not seen as something only experts can do, but rather something that every human being has a right and an obligation to do as a way of being in community with others. And so, sorry, I'm just going to enable the captions here. So that teaching has always been very close to my heart since I heard that interview and I helped to transcribe it as part of the past research project I was in. And it's a motivation for me to keep on sharing ways that we can integrate art in so many different avenues of our work as a way of community building, and even as a way of decolonizing many of our practices that tend to kind of silo us and separate art out. And I feel like by bringing art into our work the way many of you who are joining us here today, I feel like that's like a really important part of just a decolonizing practice. I'll link in the chat later the interview this is from. But if we can go to the next slide, I'd like to now introduce my colleagues who are joining me. Starting with, first of all, Melvin Sadiora from the Center for Dialogue, who is offering us Zoom tech support here. You'll see him written on the screen as tech support Melvin. So if you run into any issues, please feel free to send him a message and he's here to support us. And here on our screen, we see the lovely members of our current research team, the Performing Mentorship Research Project, which is funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. We came together almost a decade ago in the Art for Social Change project, where Dr. Lynn Fels was one of the co-investigators, I believe is the correct term. And all the rest of us were research assistants. And as that project developed over 5 years, when it concluded, we had developed really great relationships with each other, despite working all across Canada. And we wanted to continue working together. We wanted to continue to do a deeper dive into mentorship in particular. And so we came together under a second grant that started in 2019. It's gotten a little delayed because of the pandemic. And some of our field studies are still in the works, but we will hopefully get there, and wanted to convene this event today as a way of sharing some of the conversations that we've been having and expanding that out with all of you who seem to be so interested. We are so thrilled to see such a great interest in this event. So as a quick brief introduction, we've got our principal investigators, Dr. Lynn Fels, a professor in Simon Fraser University's Faculty of Education. Her research explores arts inquiry and arts for social change, including how we can reimagine mentorship in collaborative performative spaces. We've got collaborator Dr. Shira Taylor, who is the founder of the most magnificent Sext, a Canadian theatre company dedicated to educating young people about sexual health topics. And she's here with us. She'll be speaking with 3 of the youth mentors from that company, Lauren Chang, Charmaine Chang, and Emma Wheaton. We've got Callista Chassie, who's in the picture with me up on the screen, who's a social worker, an educator, and a counselor from Lethbridge, who's passionate about arts-based community work and has been involved in research in this field through the Art for Social Change project since 2014, just about as long as me. And Dr. Lisa Njuru, who is a psychotherapist and artist, with certifications in psychodrama and conflict resolution, and a skilled practitioner of playback theater. So as I mentioned, for the last few years, we've been exploring together this concept of mentorship, which we've been framing as a performance. One is that is enacted in different ways in different contexts. And today, through this virtual dialogue, we're eager to learn about the ways in which you might have been engaging in mentorship in your practices, the kind of qualities and values that are important to mentorship in the field of community arts, and how we can support each other to foster fruitful mentorship relationships that are sustainable over time. And if we move to the next slide, I'm just going to share quickly, actually one more further before the housekeeping. So just to share today's rough agenda, we're going to be interspersing chances for breakout dialogues to hear from everyone in the room with what I'm calling focused conversations. So these will be short 10-15 minute conversations with select artists from our research, starting with Dr. Judith Marquis, who started us off with the original research project. Then we'll have a breakout discussion. We're going to have 2 health breaks at the top of the hours. The next conversations will be with Shira Taylor and her team, as well as Callista, Lynn, and I. And then a second breakout discussion, a second health break, and our last focus conversation with Lisa and plenary dialogue to kind of conclude the event. And just jumping back to that housekeeping slide, I will note that today's session is being recorded. This is hopefully to be able to share with folks who were not able to come today. And as I mentioned, if you have any technical issues, please reach out to Melvin. And throughout the dialogue, I really invite you, even when different conversations are happening, to share your ideas, your questions, your thoughts in the chat. And as a team, we're going to be trying to moderate that, although we will be slow kind of toggling back and forth between the 2 screens. But it's sometimes nice to have a little bit of a conversation going, especially in an event that's this long. So thanks again for joining us. And I think we'll close the screen share at this point. And I just wanted to kind of get us started with a little bit of just kind of opening the topic, first of all, with if you have a moment to share in the chat where you're joining us from, where in Canada you're from, what kind of practice you have, what brings you into this room today, whether you are an artist facilitator, whether you're interested in being an artist facilitator, whether you're just interested in having more of the arts in your field. So please feel free to type in the chat and to kind of start to bring up some of those stories of what brings us in here today. So I'm gonna give a moment for that actually, so that we can also read a little bit about who we all are. There's over 50 of us in here, so I don't wanna, we won't be able to do as many rounds of everyone sharing introductions as we would in a smaller group. Yeah, it's exciting to see that you've even got folks coming internationally from the UK, from Montreal, working in well-being education and museum education, artists, counseling, filmmaking. Wonderful. It's wonderful to read all the stories in here, and I'll try to keep on browsing through as our event goes on, and hopefully there'll be chances for us to share different aspects of our work. I wanted to kind of warm up, and now that we found the chat, we're starting typing. I wanted to warm up the topic of mentorship by inviting us into a bit of a creative brainstorm, and we're going to use a Zoom technique, we'll call it, called the waterfall, in which we're all going to think of one response to a couple question prompts I'm going to offer. And but hold your word until I count to 3, and then we're all going to kind of share our word, our response all at once, so that we all kind of see it come together. So I'll give a couple minutes for a couple more introductions to pop in. And the first prompt that I was going to share was thinking of the sentence, mentorship in the arts is ... So think about, what is mentorship in the arts for you? We're just going to hold for a couple minutes. And then in 3, 2, 1, let's all share in the chat what is mentorship in the arts for you. Let's all share right now. Wonderful. And now let's share mentorship in the arts needs. What does mentorship in the arts need? And 3, 2, 1, go. I'm seeing a lot about connection, community, support, funding, relationship, time. Wonderful. And the last prompt to warm us up is mentorship in the arts creates. What does mentorship in the art create? 3, 2, 1, go. it's wonderful how these two mirror each other. We said that we need community and connections to do the mentorship, and then it also creates that. It creates future, it creates energy, culture, care. Wonderful. So welcome into this space, and hopefully we can kind of generate some of those beautiful things that mentorship in the arts creates just by being in this room together and by mentoring one another through our learnings and our experiences that we're going to be sharing today. And so for our first focused conversation, I'd love to welcome Dr. Judith Marquis. For those who might not know her, although she's such a renowned name in this field. Dr. Marquis is a renowned dancer, choreographer, director, and founder of the International Center for Art for Social Change. She was a principal investigator, as I mentioned, in the Art for Social Change research project that was a foundation of our current exploration into mentorship. And she's now leading through ICASC the Futures Forward Art for Social Change mentorship program that seeks to address the gap in mentorship that we noticed in this field by pairing seasoned artists with early to mid-career artists to develop and implement community-engaged arts activities that address the needs of community partner organizations. Mentors and mentees connect with one another and the larger cohort over 6 months, and both sides receive a stipend. And so we're going to be hearing more about this wonderful program from Judith directly, but I first wanted to just welcome you into the space, Judith. Hope you're having a lovely morning.
Thanks so much, Nicole. What a joy to see so many people here on the call, and especially to see all our former research assistants taking over this event and doing this important research. I'm delighted to be with you all.
Oh, it's such a lovely coming together of our past and current research project.
Yeah.
Before we dive deeper into the Future Forwards program, I wanted to ask you, Judith, like you've been such a both formal and informal mentor for so many of us for so many years. And I remember when we were talking the other day, you mentioned there's something qualitatively different about mentorship in the arts and in community engaged arts. And I was wondering if you could share just a little bit about what you've seen and what you've experienced, some of those values or qualities that make it different.
Okay, well, just to say, I'm almost 75 and I've been working in the arts since forever, and have been very lucky to be mentored by other people over the course of my career. And some of the values that we've incorporated into the Futures Forward program come out of that experience and the experiences of the mentors who are working with us. We're now on cohort 4. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is the notion, because of the values of community engaged practice itself, the notion of co-learning. So it's about dialogue and it's about equal voice. And it's also about not knowing where you're going. What we do in the Futures Forward program is we ask the mentors and the mentees to develop a learning agreement together. And this begins the conversation about what matters to them, about the work, where they feel the gaps are, what the mentor feels are perhaps important pieces of information to be shared. But essentially, it's a very organic process of conversation, and I think that for us is perhaps a different way of approaching mentorship, other than in contrast to the direct transfer of information from one person to another. So it's a reciprocal arrangement and a flexible one. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you frame that as not knowing where you're going, because I think that's one of the things that struck me right away when we were starting to explore mentorship and what that means here, that it's not something that you can have, a set template that you apply to every situation. And it's very much, both the arts and facilitation, and especially when they come together, it's so on your feet and you're thinking in the moment, and the art itself is kind of being created as you go. You can't necessarily even know what that's going to look like.
And so it's a liminal space, and it can be uncomfortable. But if those parameters are laid out at the beginning of a mentorship process, it becomes easier to live comfortably in that liminal space. And as artists, we never know where we're going. So, there's the fit.
What kind of parameters do you feel are really, you mentioned speaking about what matters most. So I'm imagining kind of a value-based conversation, but are there specific parameters that kind of help to hold a space for these projects, or?
I guess as I get older, I'm more and more aware of the centrality of one's ability to be an active listener. And that's an ongoing process throughout our lives. So many of us are so anxious to change the world that sometimes we can dominate a mentorship process. That meme, we're all the experts of our own lives, it just comes back to me over and over again in this work. And so respect, reciprocity, patience, the ability to be porous as a mentor. So meaning that you can take in information, process it, and send out the next steps all at the same time is a learned skill. And that demands a fairly large toolbox of so that you can pull very quickly in response to what's happening in your conversations. Silence is a very important part, because unless people, we don't want people falling asleep, but in our culture we move so quickly, there's no processing time, there's no reflection time. And I think reflection is an absolute essential component of any kind of mentorship process. So giving oneself enough time to process and reflect is a really important component, I think, of any successful mentoring process.
I'm wondering, one of the things that also struck me as unique about the Futures Forward is that it is a pairing of the mentor and the mentee, but there's also this community organization through which the work is done. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how that relationship, that kind of triad works. Yeah. and
yeah, sure. Well, relationship is the big word there, as it is in ASC work, NASC work, art for social change work. Just the structure is that once the mentor and the mentee have agreed on an initial way of working together, we pair them, or at this point, if people have an environmental, because we're working with environmental organizations, if they have an organization with which they're already working and they want to continue working, or they have an idea of an organization with which they would like to work, we initiate a conversation there. What has come to us, which is really interesting, is that the co-creation of a project, a community engaged project with these organizations, enables and is necessary for the host organization, which may or may not know much about the processes and goals of ASC work. And so in that co-creation process, once we've had our initial conversations from the admin side of the program, those conversations with the organizations become fundamentally important for the nature of the project, which takes place, the community project, which takes place over 6 months. There are inevitably flips of language because we use different languages. You know, as in any partnership, and if you go to the ICAST website, there's a sort of summary of partnerships. Nicole, you know very well about this after the 50-hour-long interviews we did. There's a short summary there of some of the ideas we have about those partnerships and some of the advice that we offer for people who are trying to engage and sustain partnerships. And what we found is most of the environmental organizations with which we've been working are coming back for another round, and some of them are continuing work with our artists, and we're out of the picture at that point. We're like a seeding program. And I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm wandering all over the place here. Yeah.
And I think it is really interesting to think about it in because, as you mentioned, me and you work very closely doing a lot of research on what makes good partnerships between community organizations and artists. And at the time, I don't think I had thought of it as a mentorship, but now looking back, I see how, you know, every partnership is also a mentorship and mentoring both ways, you know.
Exactly, it's co-learning. Yeah, absolutely. And co-creation as well in terms of the projects that people do. That's when it's working really, really well. And it does work really, really well most of the time. And we've had problems with capacity on the other end. People get all passionate about doing the work, and then later on in the process, we have to check in on roles and responsibilities because perhaps capacity changes. And of course, we've been doing this throughout the pandemic. So the vicissitudes of all of that rear their heads, and adjustments need to be made. But one of the things that is most precious about what we're doing for me is the ability online to connect across the country, from Whitehorse and Yellowknife to Labrador. And so our monthly meetings together become really interesting and useful opportunities for exchange and co-learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how I felt about bringing this virtual dialogue together as well. When the pandemic started and we were starting to do more of this kind of work in the Center for Dialogue, I thought, oh, this is just, you know, our research team has been connecting across Canada all this time and mentoring each other coast to coast. And I thought how wonderful to be able to actually gather in a room together without the cost of flights and accommodations.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of which, if I can do a small pitch, Nicole, is that okay? Yeah. We have a new national organization of art for social change hubs across the country. It's called the Art for Social Change Network, ASKN, just ASKN. We're holding our first public gathering from January 25th to the 27th. It's 3 half days of dialogues, panels, and we'll be addressing things like justice and equity aims, partnerships, digital innovation. There's 6. Anyway, I won't go into detail, but if you go to the website, to icast.ca, the full program will be up later today, I believe. And again, you can register, it's free. And we're hoping for 300 people every day, which is our maximum online at this point. Really, really excited about this new initiative, and hopefully the gathering will, it's called Ask Now, will provide connection for us, which is so badly needed in our sector, in our practice. Are we a sector? Are we a practice? Very interesting question.
It's very exciting to hear that that's going live today. It's been in my calendar for like a month, and so I'm very much looking forward to connecting there again. And yeah, thanks for sharing that, and we'll be sharing after today's event is over a little report back on what we've heard today, but also sharing links of definitely that gathering, as well as the Futures Forward program for folks who might be interested in joining that.
There's a ton of information about Futures Forward on the site as well. So
if I can sneak in one last question about that, we were wondering, what have you seen? So you mentioned that some of the artists have continued working with the community organizations. Have you seen similar sustained relationships between some of the mentor-mentee pairings, or
yes,
within the cohort itself?
Yes, absolutely. We're feeling that there's that we need to develop a community of practice in Canada. So many people are working in isolation, and we share so much. There's a full range. I mean, the diversity of how people are doing this work is quite wonderful. And there's so much to be gained by connecting with others who are perhaps doing things in a different way than we are, but whose expertise is really valuable for our own work and for the practice itself.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely, and I feel like these kind of gatherings and the one that's coming at the end of January are hopefully going to keep on reinforcing that sense of practice.
And just in terms of advocacy, Nicole, I mean, we are so under the radar as an art practice, increasingly present as a result of the pandemic, when people are realizing that community engaged art practice is, really important for the well-being of our communities. But still, we're really, really under the radar. And so by coming together with, unified or diverse voices, but still rooted in shared values, we stand a chance of lifting the practice into the public arena, and ultimately getting support for the important work that we're all doing across the country.
Very true. Well, thank you again so much, Judith, for joining us. And I think this is a great jumping off point for our first set of breakout groups.
Great. Well, I'm just about to facilitate a national meeting of Futures Forward, so I'm going to have to leave you. But I wish you all good things. Really enjoy the conversations, and I send respect and warmth to all of you on this winter day.
Thank you so much, Judith.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Okay, and with that, I think we're going to start to move into our first round of breakout discussions. Myself, Lynn, Lisa, and Shira are going to each be taking some of you into a different breakout room. If you for some reason feel more comfortable to just step back at this point from the breakout discussions, you can also stay in the main room, and we'll be back after our smaller discussions. Melvin will be here if there's any tech support needed. But we're going to be starting off with a breakout discussion, kind of getting to know who's here and what brings you here, and some of the experiences. So we've heard Judith's experience, as she mentioned, starting Futures Forward during the pandemic was probably not what she had seen coming, but I'm sure we've all had, either before the pandemic or even during, different experiences with mentorship that would be lovely to start to unearth these stories, look at different models that exist across Canada. So I'm going to invite Melvin to send us off to our rooms, and we'll be returning at around 10 for a health break, and then a couple more conversations with Shira and myself and on our team. So Melvin, feel free to, and yeah, the breakout discussions will not be recorded, as Lynn is mentioning in the chat. So it's a kind of a space to speak, you know, with the comfort of not having everything noted down. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I'm just going to, we're going to take a little pause at this point, just for a little health break, 10 minutes, and we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. Feel free to turn off your video, and we'll be hearing from Shira when we come back. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to start to welcome us back into our shared space here. Although feel free if you're still grabbing a snack or some water to slowly rejoin us. I'm just going to give a couple minutes as folks re-enter. I was really struck by the diversity of arts practices in just the breakout room that I was in. We had folks in arts and health, post-secondary education, design, working with disability communities, mental health organizations. So it's such a diverse practice, and it is interesting to be able to talk across sectors through the connection of the art making. So very unique kind of field to be in, where we have the shared language across different types of work that we're doing. I'm going to pass the mic over, though, at this point to my colleague Shira Taylor and her wonderful peer mentors from Sex Education by Theater. So take it away, Shira.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Very happy to be here with all of you today. So my name's Shira Taylor. I'm the creator and director of Sext, and Sext, which is my background here, is an award-winning, culturally empowering, theater-based peer education workshop and performance program that I founded as my doctoral thesis at the Della Lana School of Public Health at the University of Toronto. I'm not going to test you all on that later. Since 2014, peer educators have performed our play on sexual and mental health topics for over 10,000 young people across Canada, aiming to address the needs of newcomer and Indigenous youth. As a field study of the mentorship project, which Nicole and I and the rest of our team are a part of, peer educators have taken on new roles as peer mentors and community researchers. And we're really lucky to have 3 of those peer mentors here today to tell you a little bit about our journey during the pandemic. So I'm going to pass it off to peer mentor Charmaine.
Thank you, Shira. So I just want to paint a picture for how we were in the beginning of COVID. So it's March 2020. We're booking schools to our 3rd national tour. 5 of us have just been hired as peer mentors, and we are planning to train a new cohort of 20 peer educators. Now, this would have been my first national tour, as my high school schedule before didn't allow me to be in the 2 previous ones. So I was really excited for this. Then COVID-19 hit. Suddenly, everything shut down. The tour was canceled. The entire cast was stuck in their homes. Me personally, I was stuck at home with my sister, who is a fellow peer mentor here in this call. And we're stuck together for the first time in a year. I didn't know how to deal with her. So, of course, we just came together and we decided to do what we do best. So we made a music video about it. So this music video you're about to watch was filmed in isolation, and it was brought together by the excellent editing skills of our fellow peer mentors. So here is It Wasn't Me, the quarantine parody. Take it away, Melvin.
Clara, let me in.
Haven't you heard? There's a virus out there. A coronavirus so powerful that we must be apart to protect each other.
Virus? What virus?
Gerald, if you truly love me, leave me. But leave the chocolates at the door.
I shall go. But if anyone asks who was spreading the virus, tell them it wasn't me.
Alright.
COVID-19 canceled all my plans and I'm crying on my bedroom floor. Wait. Picture this, I was gonna go to France, but now I can't go out no more. Now I'm online and I see posts about people like me spreading hate cause they blame Asians for the spread of COVID-19.
Why are you yelling at the people on the subway?
Why?
Being so cruel and spreading hate and acting ugly. Just because I look a certain way you wanna punch me. Cause you wanna blame me for the virus in your country. Listen, This is not the time to play. It's not to the doctors inside we all stay. Yes, sir. Maybe download Tinder and find yourself a bae. But if they wanna meet them, tell them,
I have prior commitments.
are you spreading the corona?
It wasn't me.
Going out just cause you wanna?
It wasn't me.
Putting TB in your houses?
It wasn't me.
Fake news on WhatsApp?
It wasn't me.
Only leaving for groceries?
That's me.
Attending lectures in my jammies?
That's me.
Staying up to bake cookies?
That's me.
Worrying about the economy?
At home playing Animal Crossing, cause I lost my job last week.
It is what it is.
I guess I'll just apply for EI, keep up my Snapchat streaks. All my friends are posting push-ups, please don't nominate me. My sleep schedule super messed up, time to try whipped coffee.
I know that it's really hard to work in quarantine, but productivity is not the only point of being. Don't feel guilty about the time you spend on screen. Don't touch your face, focus on your hygiene. Focus. This is the time to come together. Stay inside, protect your grandma, sister, and your brother. Look out the window if you want to see the weather. Pray that in a couple months or so it gets better.
Inshallah.
Are you spreading the corona?
It wasn't me.
Going out just cause you wanna?
It wasn't me.
Getting close to strangers?
It wasn't me.
Putting your family in danger?
It wasn't me.
Attending Zoom parties?
That's me.
Tiger King in my jammies?
That's me.
TikTok dances with Charlie?
That's me.
I am still worried about the economy.
I'm bored, so I'm downloading Tinder, loving the time of COVID-19. Call me. This man says he wants to come over, told him stay away from me.
911.
If the virus doesn't take you out.
Well, baby, can I?
Saw that line on Insta, sorry, but I thought it was a nice try.
A+. Wanna thank all the healthcare workers, y'all are so strong. Wanna thank all of the frontline people still working on. Sending prayers to the people hurt by COVID-19. We can all try to help out by staying in quarantine.
COVID-19 canceled all my plans, but I don't wanna cry no more.
No more, no more.
Scrolling through past all the hateful posts, spread love from my bedroom floor. We will do our best to help the cause by staying inside. Help our friends and neighbors finding ways to volunteer our time.
Don't give your sit to Nick Corona. Bobby doesn't want Corona. Protect your mama from Corona.
So, can we talk about the economy now?
All right, so with our group, we did move online to make music videos and virtual shows, one of which you just saw, one of our music videos, which I have to say I really liked that video. But we did have some challenges. So our community that Sext is based in is the Flemingen Park and the Thorncliffe Park communities, which is characterized by like high-rise buildings, large families, people sharing homes. It's an immigrant community, which is majorly a demographic of South Asian Muslim population. So one of our main issues running the program, like the mentorship part of it was, and also the performing aspect was the privacy was a big issue, particularly with the live shows, because with performing, we always want to like project. So we kind of have to be quite loud so people can actually hear us and get the information. And it's kind of awkward when we're singing about vaginas and I'm like wearing a penis hat because I'm playing Captain Condom. And it's very awkward with my dad hearing everything because, as I said, privacy is like basically non-existent. And we do want to give our all for the audience. So it was kind of awkward for me to perform with my parents basically hearing everything. But for some people in our cast, like it would, that kind of content in the household would just not fly with them. So that was a huge challenge. And also another challenge is not everybody has their own computers. So there's like accessibility challenges. And also in our community, we had really, really high COVID rates because it is such a densely populated community. Like I said, with like the high-rise buildings, and often there's like large families and multi-generational households, like all living in the same place. And so it's hard to isolate in that way. And also availability was also a challenge. Like 2 of our other peer mentors are not here today, Isfan and Narusha, but like shout out to them, we miss you. And so, for example, Isfan couldn't do some of the shows because he shares a room with his siblings. So, and in his household, it's not okay for like him to kind of talk about sex ed and things like that. And also he did have COVID, so he was like stage managing some of our shows while having COVID. So I don't really know how he did that, but like shout out. And our other peer mentor, Narusha, often wasn't available because she works as a frontline worker. So often her schedule is like conflicting when we wanted to do performances. So that was a challenge. And also self-filming was also a huge challenge because a lot of us were just trying to like film on our phones. And it's very hard. Like a lot of us don't have a lot of room at home. So it's kind of hard to like self-film and make sure we're in the shot, because I know for me it was like very hard for me to get the camera actually set up like far away enough from me that I would actually not be jumping out of frame often. And also for things where we needed like green screens, I would just have to like tape a sheet to the wall and it would like always fall down. But with all of these challenges, like the availability, the COVID rates, the lack of privacy, we were thinking, oh, if it's this hard for our group, who is like kind of more comfortable talking about sex ed and mental health, imagine how hard it's going to be for new youth that we would be bringing into the program who are new to the topic. So that's why we decided not to progress with training new cast members virtually. And we're kind of hoping that soon it'll be safe enough to do it in person, but for now we're on hold for that. But also there were a lot of benefits to pivoting to the online format. So I'm gonna have Lauren take it away with our benefits.
Yeah, so unexpectedly, as everything has been during the pandemic, there were some silver linings. To work together as a group, we ended up establishing weekly meetings. They were very, very late because we had to wait until all of our parents were asleep. So we'd be logging onto Zoom at like 11 p.m. But it's just so nice to see these people that you've developed these relationships with. And it is sort of a break from whatever like pandemic monotony was going on in the household. So that was a really nice way to connect and work together and sort of think about what we wanted to do. The other thing that I think I've been noticing even in this call is the chat functionality is something completely new that was not possible in an in-person situation. Based on the topics we talk about, sometimes people don't feel safe. Sometimes there's just teachers walking around and students don't know how they should react. But the chat, like it was just amazing to see people just like react in real time to what we were doing, because usually if it was an in-person performance you can see people's faces, but that's about it. But actually getting a voice and actually having us react back, I think built a really interesting performance experience that would only be possible through Zoom. We wrote down a lot of these funny comments and just like things that made us feel nice, like people saying like this is like the funniest Friday ever, or this is like the most amazing meeting that we've ever been to, and it really encouraged us to even put on a better performance. So those were definitely some amazing moments that I think hopefully we'll be able to integrate into our live performances in some way. And finally, as sort of research assistants, we've gotten the chance to focus on studying ourselves for a while. When we were sort of in-person mode, a lot of it was just like, okay, we need new material, where are we performing next, what are we doing? But this has really given us a time to reflect on the last like 6 whatever years together, and to really think about how we've changed through this process. And I think something I really enjoyed was doing our peer interviews, where I would sit down with like Emma, for example, and we would just like relive our favorite memories and just think about these sorts of things. And it was just a really nice time as everything stopped to just reflect and see where we want to go afterwards. So we learned a lot based on these things, and we did what we do best, which is make a music video about it. So now we're going to play to you a music video that we made also during the pandemic, but a little bit later when we thought that like COVID was almost done, which was a lie. But it's called Quarantine Dream, and it's sort of our dreams of what life could be like afterwards, like things we would leave in the past, in the pandemic, in the quarantine, and a better future. So I hope it leaves everyone on a more hopeful note.
Michelle, don't make it obvious, but there is a hot guy behind us. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious.
Who's a good boy?
Is he looking at me?
Forget the guy. Look at the dog.
Michelle! Do you know what I'm looking forward to after COVID-19? Flirting with strangers without a mask on my face, attending protests without waiting 14 days, maybe go dancing, and a lot of guys try to grind from behind. Dating in person, then maybe ends with a kiss. We'll wear protection and not just over our lips. I'll take a break from fighting my family. Set me free. Let's imagine that after quarantine, things will change with us. Enact better social policy. You and I will make change together. You and me. Let's believe in our quarantine dreams. Post COVID-19, I can't sleep. Let's make a change and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back. I have learned so much about me, figuring out who I wanna be. Let us grow in quarantine and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back.
Don't ever look back, no. When this pandemic is over, I'ma revise, make changes to my life, my mental health, I'ma prioritize. See, I learned about growth through being alone. On my phone at home, trying to get in the zone. Trying to use a pandemic, a global disaster, to make myself better, stronger, faster. But it ain't easy, I've been chipping away. Revolutions like Rome ain't built in a day. They take time and effort and a ton of tears. And the process is slow, but I'm getting there. So there's no going back, I'm not the same. And this world's gonna need some structural change. But after quarantine, I know one thing is true. There'll be a new world and a new me too.
You and me. Let's believe in our quarantine dreams. Post COVID-19, I can't sleep. Let's make a change and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back. I have learned so much about me, figuring out who I wanna be. Let us grow in quarantine and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back. Accessibility and make tampons free. Tell me your quarantine dreams tonight. Practice ukulele, set good boundaries. Believe our quarantine dreams tonight. You and me. Let's believe in our quarantine dreams. Post COVID-19, I can't sleep. Let's make a change and don't ever look back. Don't ever look back. We can't stop until equality. It's not enough until we're all free. Let us find better solutions and never look back. Don't ever look. Let us fight the patriarchy. Start a bakery. Tell me your quarantine dream tonight. They'll say they're just fantasies, but that's jealousy. Believe your quarantine dream tonight.
Thank you so much.
So fantastic, Shira and the team. It's always hard to follow the videos. They're so fantastic, and it's been such a great like I've been just blown away with what you guys have been able to do during the pandemic and the distancing. And even though that your field study is still, pending on the horizon for the work that you wanted to do with the next generation of mentors, I feel like there's also already been such a great mentoring relationship just in creating these. And for me, it really speaks to, I was speaking in the last breakout room, there's kind of an overlap when we speak about mentorship between mentoring about how to do the art and then mentoring about how to facilitate others doing the art. And I feel like it's impossible to parse those out completely and have them as two separate discussions because they're happening simultaneously. Even just in your guys' group, right now it's been more focused on creation as a form of mentorship and as a form of staying connected. And that kind of brings me into our next conversation where I'd like to invite Lynn and Callista, if you're around and free, to have a little conversation about our experiences within this research project. So Callista and I have been, kind of collaborating over the last year in kind of a study within a study. The idea was that we would be studying mentorship in the field through Lisa's work and Shira's work, where they're out there doing mentorship and community engaged arts projects. But at the same time, we realized we're a group of researchers, and we were interested in how we're mentoring each other, what kind of mentorship is happening within a research space, especially one that is across Canada. And then we got the pandemic thrown in there. Originally, we wanted to meet in person. And yes, please feel free, Lisa and Shira, in joining this conversation, because I think this is, it was kind of Callista and I organizing some of the thought behind it, but it's been an experience for all of us. So yeah, I maybe we could just start by reflecting on what we've noticed about mentorship that's arisen in our research group as we were connecting digitally.
Well, it's kind of funny because as a professor, there's that hierarchy that I resist all the time. Even jumping in here, I realized I just failed. First of all, I want to say thank you to Shira and Sex and Lauren and Charmin and Emma for bringing joy into this time. It always amazes me how art and experiencing it as you shared your videos reminds me of the gift art is. And so thank you for that. And it's been a gift working with Shira and Lisa and Nicole and Callista, thinking about mentorship and mentorship as performance. And the big question is, how do I perform mentorship? And understanding that I don't have expertise at all in these areas where you are out there working and doing your art in very challenging, difficult situations. And so my question was always, how do I hold this space? What kind of container is it? And to thank all four of you for the gift and the group of Sex for letting me understand that mentorship is not being front and center, but to step and simply try to hold a space, create a space.
Yeah, I think that idea of holding space was one of the things that really struck me as well in this past year. One of the key things that we've been staying connected a lot through these virtual chats, very much like this. But of course, because of scheduling and time constraints and illness and all these other things, we're not always all able to be in the space together, but holding space has been definitely one of the big things for me, and just knowing that this community is still here and it's waiting for when I am able to step in again, if I have been away for a little bit. And sometimes just knowing that has been a form of mentorship, strangely. Like I'm not actually getting concrete advice on work that I'm doing, which is how I used to think of mentorship as very much you're learning how to do something. And in this collaboration, for me, mentorship has really become more about the relationship, about having colleagues who turn into friends, and having that space.
And Nicole, if I can add in, one of the things that drew us to continue working together, as you mentioned in your opening comments, was this the friendships and connections that grew out of all of us, with the exclusion of Lynn being research assistants on the former project. And we felt like we were really privileged during that project to gather in physical space once a year. And that just intensified all of our relationships and allowed for us to get to know Lynn and the other co-investigators in ways that we felt at that time couldn't be accomplished or sustained throughout the year when we were communicating more so digitally. It was like we had to have that face-to-face time. So we were really excited to get the opportunity to continue to build our mentorship practices and our arts-based change work, however we define that in our given areas, in this new project. But then COVID meant all of a sudden we were facing a potential future where we wouldn't have those intense face-to-face interactions that were so fruitful for us in developing mentorship relationships with our peers and also with the leaders of that former project. So to Lynn's comments about holding space, one thing that Nicole and I have been exploring in this self-study is about this digital space. And I have to say, you know, we could probably have a whole chat segment cheering Lynn Fells on here, but Lynn sends these incredibly beautiful emails just out of the blue. And I know that I feel this sense of encouragement and care and this reach across space that, you know, even though it's in a digital form, I'm reading it in my email, it simulates for me her warm and caring presence that is so vital as we've come to see it in mentorship relationships. So, and Lynn's not alone in that. I know that we've extended those warm wishes to one another as well, but that's one of the takeaways I think from our project thus far, is that we can create that warmth and connection and relationship by bringing authenticity to our digital space and our communication, even when it's not live and in real time or in person.
I'm always curious where the cracks and cracks are, you know, the gaps. I always feel like I'm dropping balls in this work. Sorry, Lisa, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to embarrass you further.
No, let's
I was just, but I yes, I resonate with that. This idea of those things that come out and touch you. I was in East Africa in October, and I got one of those touch where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm still connected, right? And I think that like for myself, I know that I'm able to hold space because you hold space. So these are these sort of, you know, we can hold because we are also held. And those are such interesting pieces. I think that we need to, especially now, we need to be able to hold each other, right? Like there's something about community and holding that is really and Karen, I read you this idea about holding space, right? Yeah,
what does that mean?
It's an interesting metaphor, especially I feel in these pandemic times, right, where space has not been a physical thing for so many, even with their families and education. And for me, holding space, I think, is maintaining community in especially this practice, because as Judith was mentioning at the beginning of our conversation with her, the community engaged arts they're a little bit underwater. I think there's a lot happening, and I think there's a lot of people in integrating arts in their work, but they're not necessarily connected. And since we are often working in different sectors, we can often, I think, feel alone, like we're the only ones doing this and we're pioneering the work. And opportunities like the one today, where we actually are able to touch base with each other and be like, hey, there's other folks who are doing this. I know whenever I see something arts-based pop up as an event, I'm always like, yes, sign me up, because it just feels like such a great opportunity to connect with folks who are interested in this kind of thing. And so for me, that is what the holding the space is. And that's what I'm hoping, that ICASC network, for example, might be able to give this field. It's just a recurring place where you can gather, for whether it's virtual or in person maybe one day. But for our project, for example, it has just been virtual meetings, and having a rhythm to it. So for us, it was every Wednesday of the month is when we are planning a meeting, and whoever can come, and we keep that rhythm going, so that whether it's our semesters are changing for those who are in education or different scheduling things, we know that there's a lunch hour opportunity that's there. And so for me, I think it's a mixture of that repetition and relationship that is what I understand as holding space. But I don't know if folks have other ideas.
I'll just add in too that one thing that's arisen from our connection, that I suppose would probably, I imagine for many of you listening, would be relevant in your context too, is we discovered that holding a space or the connection couldn't be purely administrative or purely sort of pragmatic. We are undergoing research, we are overseeing field studies, there are details that need to be attended to in terms of meeting our funders' requirements and our projects. And so we need to deal with those, and there's been mentorship through some of that. Some of us are more versed in the research world or academic world than others, me being on the lower end of that spectrum at any rate. But there's definitely there was a need that we identified for human connection and being able to share what was going on in our lives. And many of us have, in the time we've known each other, completed grad school programs, entered the professional world, started families, continued our families, moved, taken on new ventures. So we needed that personal piece of connection too. And so we just recognized that and made space for it. So I guess that's the other piece that comes to my mind when I think about that holding space, is not just to be able to deal with the challenges that are arising or the administrative, organizational stuff, but also for the personal.
And just to build on that, when we all met doing the Cross Canada Art for Social Change project, and part of my portfolio on that project was I got to travel across the country and meet with different team members. And our goal was to find out what made a cross Canada collaboration work. And this is when we were still able to gather. And one of the key findings of that research was that it was the coffee breaks, and it was like the informal interactions that happen, where that's where the idea for this project came out of. It wasn't necessarily during a structured kind of dialogue or presentation. It was during side conversations and during late night dance parties in our hotel. Yes. So of course, we can't really replicate late night hotel dance parties, unfortunately. Maybe we could, and we're not, but I think like when we gather, having time to just kind of vent about our lives and connect socially, like I'm reiterating what everyone said, but that really is key, even according to the research.
Thanks, everyone. Maybe Lisa, do you want to share one last reflection?
I was thinking about the Lynn was talking about a gap, because she's mindful of the gap. And at the same time, I was thinking about how one of the other things was this, and I think that it speaks to your idea of repetition, Nicole, this idea of presence, because there were plenty of friction, right? Like there's plenty of friction in like challenge in the doing of what we do, in the relationships that it's relational work, and it's challenging. So there's plenty of that. And at the same time, this idea of presence, I found was really interestingly, like, for example, I'm thinking about a time where I was struggling, for example, with financial resources, but financial resources not because of but financial resources that made it so that being generous was difficult because I felt scarcity, right? And it wasn't a question of having resources to give. It was more a question of having presence to give space to the struggle and then for it to go. It was really interesting. It's very, very interesting, this being present to each other, or the quality of presence.
I love that you mentioned that, because it is a field also where there is that tension with the scarcity mentality that can creep in when we are vying for grants and vying for, you know, organizational space or funding to do this kind of work. And there can be, I think that can separate community engaged artists a little bit more, where they don't want to necessarily you know, be sharing ideas. And I think someone in the chat was mentioning, how do we hold space if we are in a space where it's not even appropriate to share personal details, which definitely could come up in some of this work. So yeah, I think this might be a good jumping off point to go back into our separate breakout groups and maybe explore this conversation or other conversations that you guys were holding. And then we will be back for we'll have a breakout, we'll have another break, and then we'll have a deeper conversation with Lisa about her work, and then a closing plenary where we might be able to tease some of these threads out a little bit more. But yeah, Melvin, please feel free to bring us back into our rooms. I feel like these conversations they could just keep on going. We were just about to jump into something interesting, but it is also good to come back to plenary and see all the broader faces, and I can just imagine what's been going on in the other breakout rooms. But we're gonna turn now to lovely Lisa. Now Lisa was supposed to be joined by her artist collaborator in sharing a little bit about her work, but I don't know whether Shira, we forgot to talk about this prior to being live, so we're just going to talk it out right now. Shira, were you going to jump in and join Lisa in this conversation?
Lisa and I were having a little side conversation.
Well, let me know if you want me to step in or if you're stepping in.
I got it.
She's got it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay. So, how do I begin? So my name is Lisa Desjroux. I'm a psychotherapist. I'm a psychodramatist. I work with, I'm a theater practitioner. My practice is about creating accessible, non-medicalized, scalable strategies for healing and change in communities impacted by violence. I believe that violence flattens our lives and creates silences, and my own work so comes out of my, so I've been working a lot on intergenerational transmission of trauma, breaking the silences, and repairing trust within our communities. So I come from the Rwandan community, and my work on trauma has started in my community with survivors of organized violence and colonial violence. Right now, I'm a provost postdoctoral fellow at the University of Toronto's Faculty of Information, and I'm working. So I used to work with oral histories, and now I'm working with pre-colonial archives of oral tradition, of Rwandan oral tradition, the Ibitekerezo tales. So we were going to with Farah. We were going to speak to you here from Georgiage or Montreal, but Farah's not feeling well today, and so I'm sending out lots of love to her. And we had imagined this as a dialogue to tell you a little bit about what we do. And we're very happy that Shira has agreed to step into Farah's role. So this is a dialogue since that's how we work. Our field study is called Co-Creating Mentorship. And we want to talk about artists mentoring artists in the telling of difficult life experiences. So I'm going to share with you a little bit. One moment, please. I'm going to share with you the beautiful drawings that Alina made for us. One moment, please. Sorry. There we go. Here. Share screen. There. So Alina is a visual recorder, a visual storyteller, and she made these beautiful pictures. Can you see them? Is that big enough? Can you see it? Yeah, I start here. So this is a picture. Oops, too big. Too small. Like this. Like this. So this is a picture or a visualization of Farah's practice, which is the artist doula practice. Okay, so here we go. Shira, are you ready?
So I'm going to be reading Farah's writing. So it might be in the first person, but I'm just reading the beautiful words that Farah wrote here. Okay. So it all starts with a premise. All humans have the capacity to create. It is our uniqueness, our individuality. In the process of creation, we birth our creative identity. Our creative identity needs to be integrated into who we are as individuals. However, when individuals have experienced trauma, our relationship to ourselves, to others, the other, as well as trust and transitions can become very challenging to the capacity to create and transform. Those who are willing and able to engage with creativity and transformation can, of course, do it alone or might benefit from being accompanied through the process. So Farah refers to herself as an artist doula. And just as a doula is experienced in childbirth and provides advice, information, emotional support, and physical comfort to the new parent before, during, and after childbirth for them to gain clarity, strength, and confidence in their new role and relationship, we have found that an artist doula offers the same in birthing our creative identity to navigate transformation through difficult emotions like fear and shame, overwhelm, and blocked potential. The artist doula seeks to harmonize the creative identity with the intersectional aspects of the individual they work alongside or mentor.
So I'm going to speak to you in the first person because that's what I was going to do. So you call yourself an artist doula to describe the mentoring that you do with artists. Doula is a useful analogy to investigate the supportive practices deployed by Farah as she helps artists from mostly marginalized communities come into their own. So initially Farah was to be interviewed by me in the project, and her process was to be outlined, and then I was to step into the artist doula role and help Farah birth her own difficult story, so her own creative piece through the artist doula process. So Farah chose me for the role because of my experience with difficult stories in particular, and my skill in helping processing and trauma are complicated words, but they're recognizable. So in the end, in order to recognize my contribution and to honor the co-creative nature of the collaboration, she also then interviewed me about my approach, which I call the practice of possibility.
Lisa, can you tell us a little bit about the practice of possibility?
There you go. Just a second. So here is another one of those beautiful visualizations. Whoops. Does this work? Here you go. There. So this work came from working with the past and difficult stories in my family, in my community, intergenerational stories of exile and war and genocide and silences and stories of trauma. It comes from, or it wants to work with the past in creative and generative ways rather than nostalgic ways, for example. The idea of, or premise of the practice is that suffering is not abstract, it's very precise. That reconciliation is about reconciling with our own stories first. In the context of the Rwandan situation, there was a lot of talk about reconciliation. So the idea of reconciling with our own stories first. That experiences, memories, and trauma are specific and unique. And that it's about how being reactive to the past or silencing the past doesn't allow us to be in the present, or being appeased enough for opportunities of the present and the future to exist. We've been, so I come back to you, Farah and I have been using performative inquiry as a research method. And in that, we each attend to the experience that unfolds by listening for those moments that tug on the sleeve, right? This is Lynn's theory and practice. Those moments that, if we pay attention to them, become action sites of learning. So, Farah, tell me a little bit about what conventional mentorship means to you and what the challenge of it is.
My experience of mentorship is one where the process is primarily focused on a result. The challenge I see is that there seems to be a gap that mentees who have faced adversity, violence, or trauma fall into. Those individuals may have a lack of resiliency to reach the outcome, missing support or resources to follow through with their own project, a fear of abandonment, a lack of confidence, shame, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or a lack of empathy towards themselves. As a result, the goal that people set out with the mentor may only be a part of the process needed. The mentor may need other traits to help the mentee move through the process, and the goals may shift and change when working with themes of trauma and violence.
Difficult stories can shake suppressed stories and emotions loose, making the process less straightforward, so shaking them loose for one and the other. One important thing that may not have anything to do with whether or not the mentorship model is conventional or not, but that is very important when working with difficult stories that we have found, is the material conditions that need to be in place in order to do the work. As research associates, for example, we are not funded to do the research. And I remember struggling a lot before I got a job and a base income that allowed me the headspace and freedom to embark on this journey with you. Mentor and mentee both needed those conditions. So that's one of the things that we have found for her and for myself at different times. So Farah, why did we want to do this co-creating mentorship? How we're doing so far, and what do we want to share?
When we are used to being in the role of mentor, it is hard to be a mentee. As a helper, it is hard to focus on the self. I have my own sentiments of inadequacy, self-worth, and fear of abandonment. And I'm really interested in uncovering, discovering, learning Lisa's practice to see the similarities and differences to learn more about my own process as a mentor.
I also think it's important to say, in the context of our conversation about this, like caring for each other or caring for those who usually do the caring. So do you think it's worth doing anyway?
Yes, I think so, because it forces me to look after myself. The mentorship process to me is not unidirectional. It is about creating a community together, making the mentee-mentor exchange circular and reciprocal. And I think there is value in feeling cared for by another, especially when you are so used to looking after others. You even forget how to ask for help after a while, and that's not a good thing.
In lieu of a conclusion, we open on the question of care, particularly in the current context that demands that we take care of ourselves and each other. We're working with the premise that to birth our difficult stories is a practice of sustainability that allows us to make room to be more spacious and available for ourselves and for others. We're at a place where we're coming to the end of the gestational period, and it's the nesting time when we're looking for to create a space to welcome this beautiful and challenging creation of Farah's. In a context of collective overwhelm and fatigue, where sensitivities are raw, we're looking for a community of kindness and care to welcome what will arrive, knowing that it comes from difficult stories. We're wanting to curate an audience/community or a community audience. So that's where we're at in our work, where we're thinking, who would be an audience ready to listen to a story of trauma? In our work and our thinking, we are hoping to create a space where difficult stories can be held and heard, and we would love to continue this dialogue for our event in March. If you're interested, let us know. Please write to me. Voila.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Shira, for sharing that beautiful journey. I've heard pieces of it over time, through the different presentations and conversations we've had, but every time I feel like I hear something new in it. And of course, the story itself is evolving. And I think that brings us to one thing I did want to mention, just as a quick thread to pull out of that, the question of who is caring for the carer is kind of the seed of our hopefully next research piece that we're exploring possibilities of whether or not that will happen. But after this dialogue, we'll be sharing a report, and it'll include ways to be in touch with us if you are interested in the research work we're doing now, and of course if you're interested in some of the work that Lisa is going to be doing, Lisa and Farah are going to be doing in the coming months. So hopefully opportunities that if you are interested in some of what you've heard, or the Futures Forwards program, or the Sex Education by Theatre, there will be ways for you to reach out to us in that follow-up, and if you are interested in that idea of caring for the carer. And speaking of caring, I did forget our second health break, or running behind on the schedule. But I do want to just also thank folks, as I know sometimes folks that need to trickle out early at the end of a meeting as long as this one. And so please, thanks again for joining us. But I wanted to open this last space before noon as just a space to share reflections, whether that is from our other facilitators, from what you've heard in your breakout groups, or just other folks. What is something that you're taking away from today? Something that really inspired you or struck you, or that changed the way you're thinking about mentorship? And you can feel free to speak with voice on the mic, or just write reflections in the chat, however works for folks.
If I could raise my hand, I'd just like to thank everyone for their generosity. Generosity is a presence and sharing their beautiful ideas, bringing ideas of authenticity, grace, enlarging the space of the possible, to think of how hospitality plays into our ways of being present. Fleo offered a beautiful poem, Invitation to Brave Space, which I haven't heard before. So I am thankful for all the gifts that have arrived today. from the conversation dialogues that we have all shared, and also in the individual rooms. And food for thought, one of the key ideas that came out around mentorship is the role of food as a metaphor, but also as an offering and receiving and sharing together that enables us to enter into difficult spaces. So what food looks like in a virtual space, I kind of say that the 2 videos that Sex offered, because I felt so nourished and enlivened. So thank you.
Yeah, food and getting to see the work in action, right?
Yeah.
Other reflections or takeaways from today? One thing that was being shared in the breakout room I was in, we were discussing a lot kind of the different forms of mentorship that some of them informal, formal, whether there's funding for the kind of space. And I love that you brought that up, Lisa, because that's just such an important aspect to have the resources, to have the space to think about these things. Even being in here for 3 hours on a Tuesday morning is such a privilege that only some of us in certain career paths or life situations have this space and the freedom to just sit for 3 hours and ponder a subject. And so I'm always thinking about who's not in the room and who we need to hear about in terms of mentorship, who don't have this kind of space and time, and who needs mentorship, that who or would like to offer mentorship, but that don't have that capacity either. And especially in the fields like the arts, where we don't necessarily have a base salary to be working on, right? So that's definitely something that is still in the back of my mind, as fruitful as this conversation has been, and so lovely to connect with everyone. I'm seeing some ideas in the chat that it's important to the empowerment of the mentees as a steers of the boat, as David mentioned in a breakout room. I love that metaphor. And mentorship is or can be a delicate relationship requiring care, empathy, being with, and an awareness of all the surrounding political contexts and dynamics that can either support or hinder it. Yet at the same time, mentorship is an incredibly powerful relationship that can be so liberating. Also really love, or liberatory. Who's taking care of the facilitators, caretakers, space holders? Any other thoughts? We're also, we might end a little bit early if everyone's feeling like they've had a good, fruitful conversation. We can have a...
Nicole, can I jump in real quick?
Of course.
Something that's coming to my mind as I'm reading all of this is like, oh, my heart is so full and warm, and I just love seeing your faces and love meeting so many new folks today. And it's like all the warm fuzzies of what we're up to. But I'd be remiss to not also acknowledge that like there are definitely challenges, and something that we have talked about a lot in our collaboration is about, the boundaries and rigidness of funding for art space work in general, but also for folks like us who, we don't all have tenured positions in institutions and backing that pays the bills. And so the work that we're engaging in is side of the desk or, in our free time, haha. And that's, I'm sure, the case for many folks who are joining us today as well. So I think, adjacent to the heartwarming part of mentorship, we still also have to be making the case for how valuable it is, how valuable these long-term processes, relationships are, and be advocating for the care work that goes on and the relationship building that goes on to be supported in the ways that pay the bills too, and not just that feed our hearts and souls. So just wanted to give a nod to that, because I know that it's been mentioned a couple of times, both in the breakout room and the large space, that, you know, arts-based change work in general, but also mentorship is often happening kind of in the fringe and secondary to people's paid gigs. So it's a much bigger systemic conversation, and I don't want to leave us on a negative note, but I felt like it needed to be voiced again.
Absolutely. And one of the questions that I had kind of jotted down as a potential question for this space is, you know, what does it take to sustain mentorship in this field? And, you know, it's the resources, it's the time, it's, you know, having folks even aware of. One of the things that came up in our conversation was like knowing where the community is that you can reach out to. And I think someone in the chat also mentioned that one thing that they're taking away is knowing that folks are an email away or something like that. I can't find it right now, but you know, spaces like this do help us see the connections. But I'm wondering if there's anything else that comes to mind in terms of what else we need to be able to sustain relationships of mentorship or spaces where mentorship can thrive.
And another way of thinking about that perhaps is, what can we offer? What can we offer each other? And what does that look like?
Yeah, CJ.
You just before you said what can we offer each other, I was about to say, I think that mentoring should be a more valued thing. Someone brought up the points about how we're all seeking funding, and many of us don't have positions, working tenured positions, you know. So if we're seeking funding as an artist, sometimes the juries that I've sat on that have been community arts juries, mentoring has been, oh, look, they've mentored. That's a good thing. But I don't know in other grants, like for instance, for a community artist who just needs a 2-year break to do their own work, to heal themselves from the really heavy weight of doing a community project. Sometimes you do need to break away and just do your own work, which could be completely different. And I would like to see funding agencies have more respect for periods of mentoring. It is because there is so much learning that comes from mentoring, and there is such a wear. It's very joyous, but it's also very heavy. And there's a lot to unpack, and it's like a big meal. And there has to be I don't want to use the word healing, like there's been a hurt, but there's kind of a grounding that I think, and I've heard this talked about at lots of conferences and just small discussions that I've had. And I would like to see, I can remember when community arts was just beginning, you know, the fine art, people were going, oh no, don't find community arts, that will water down what art is for the fine artists. And I think that we're at a period now that mentoring needs to be more respected and seen, more valued as an achievement when it comes to seeking funding. So maybe if each in our own way, we can speak to whoever are the funders around us. You know, I'm not talking about a petition to the Canada Council, but I think, yeah.
And I think that's one of the opportunities of kind of delving into what mentorship looks like, because one of the points that I think it was Charles who mentioned in our breakout room was that mentorship often looks like nothing is happening at all. And I love that, because it was like, oh, that's so much like our research project in the pandemic. but the mentorship is happening, right? And so, you know, but I feel like through this project we're finding language or ways of describing the mentorship that happens in this field, so that we can then, you know, maybe better advocate for the space. So I think that, you know, if we're thinking of something we can offer, I think just offering the language and putting thought into, you know, what does that mentorship space look like, so that we are able to describe what we're looking for when we are saying, you know, we want funding for the project, but we also want funding for space for mentorship. Yeah, Lynn.
As we're talking together, I'm suddenly realizing that here, for this time and moment, we've created community mentorship. Right? We've come together, we're holding this dialogue, we're holding each other's stories. CJ, thank you so much for what you said about that weight and burden. I suffered from resilience fatigue, is what I called it last semester, which was a great term for me because then I could forgive myself. Resilience fatigue. I shall rise again, but not this day on Tuesday, November, whatever. But yeah, I think perhaps I'm hungry for community mentorship. And so I thank you for offering that for me today, for us.
No, and thanks for everyone for joining in on this. No, I think that might draw us to a close. And so thanks again, everyone, for joining us. And I hope you will continue to have wonderful mentorship opportunities and opportunities for us to connect with one another in the coming months and years. Do stay tuned for our follow-up email, and I will be, it will be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Again.
Thank you for today.
Bye.